We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace, and I'll read it for you. It goes on to say, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and...
The heavy gilded doors of Buckingham Palace closed with a cold, definitive thud, sealing away one of the most fraught private confrontations in modern royal history. For months, whispers had circulated through quiet corridors of Windsor and Clarence House regarding Prince Harry's clandestine efforts to negotiate a limited return to the royal fold. He did not ask for his former status back, nor did he demand the full restoration of his military patronages or security details. Instead, Harry submitted a meticulously drafted proposal focused on ceremonial duties, appearances at key national commemorations, and charitable work under Crown's banner. A compromise he genuinely believed would bridge the painful distance between himself and his family. However, sitting across the table in that stark, quiet room was not a panel of faceless palace bureaucrats, nor was it a public relations team armed with carefully crafted press statements. Sitting directly opposite him was Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, known throughout the world for her uncompromising dedication to duty, her iron discipline, and her absolute refusal to indulge in emotional performance, and had been entrusted by King Charles and Prince William to deliver the institution's final, binding decision. Without raising her voice, without a gesture of anger or malice, Princess removed her glasses, closed the thick folder containing Harry's proposal, and delivered the sentence the Duke of Sussex had spent years trying to avoid. She looked him directly in the eyes and made it unequivocally clear. There is no way back. The decision was not temporary, nor was it open to further appeal or negotiation. To Harry, his proposal felt modest, restrained, and deeply personal, a sincere attempt to offer olive branches while preserving the independent life he had built across the Atlantic. But to Princess Anne, who carried decades of royal tradition and institutional memory on her shoulders, the request carried the crushing weight of promises already broken. She remembered Harry as the bright, energetic young prince who had once served his country with pride, but those fond memories only made the current reality more painful. For Anne, royal service was not a part-time arrangement that could be paused and resumed whenever personal circumstances dictated. It required consistency, self-restraint, absolute discretion, and above all, unwavering loyalty to the crown. Harry sat frozen, his fingers tightening around the edge of his chair as the full gravity of her words settled into the room. He had anticipated strict conditions, lengthy probationary periods, or severe limits on his public visibility, but he had never truly prepared himself for complete finality. What chilled him most was knowing that this decision did not originate from Princess Anne alone. It bore the full, unyielding backing of both King Charles and Prince William. His father, the king, was torn between his overwhelming love as a parent and his constitutional duty as the monarch responsible for preserving the integrity of the crown. Prince William, looking ahead to his own future reign, saw every breach of trust not merely as family drama, but as a direct threat to the stability of the monarchy itself. The root of this brutal rejection was not found merely in past public interviews or commercial projects, but in a deeply guarded incident that had occurred months earlier. Following a quiet, highly sensitive meeting at Windsor, a meeting arranged in good faith between Harry, Charles, and William under strict promises of complete privacy, sensitive details and specific phrases spoken behind closed doors had somehow surfaced in media circles. That single breach transformed hesitation into absolute certainty within the palace walls. It proved to William and Charles that private reconciliation could not exist as long as confidential family moments risked being transformed into public collateral. When Princess Anne sat across from Harry, she was not just rejecting a paper proposal. She was enforcing the tragic reality that trust, once completely shattered, cannot be rebuilt through promises alone. The emotional atmosphere inside the meeting room darkened as Princess and began detailing the exact sequence of events that led the King and the Prince of Wales to reach their heartbreaking consensus. For Prince Harry, the reference to the private meeting at Windsor was a sharp, physical blow. That gathering had been arranged not as an official state summit, but as a desperate, quiet attempt by a father and two brothers to speak without the looming shadows of advisors, cameras, or legal representatives. King Charles, facing his own personal health struggles and the heavy burden of his late mother's legacy, had entered that room with a frail hope, a desire to hear his youngest son's voice without the defensive wall that years of public alienation had erected. William, despite deep-seated reservations and a fierce protective instinct over his immediate family, had agreed to sit down only after receiving explicit, personal assurances from Harry that every single word uttered would remain forever enshrined within those four walls. During that emotional afternoon at Windsor, defenses had briefly crumbled. The king had spoken with raw vulnerability about his mortality, his anxiety for the future of the monarchy, and a profound sadness over the chasm separating his sons. William had laid bare his own anxieties, emphasizing how deeply the relentless media spotlight and public disclosures had affected Catherine and their children. For a fleeting moment, it appeared as though the bond of brotherhood and filial love might prevail over years of public recrimination. Harry had looked his father and brother in the eye, promising unequivocally that their shared pain and private confessions would never be weaponized or shared. Yet, a mere few days later, that fragile sanctuary was utterly shattered. A detailed briefing document, containing specific phrasing and confidential nuances directly mirrored from their Windsor conversation, surfaced in circles connected to Harry's media strategy team. While no public broadcast was made, the mere existence of that leaked phrasing proved to William that privacy was no longer possible. The Prince of Wales was reportedly so devastated and enraged by this breach that he made a solemn vow to his father. He would never again engage in unscripted, private conversations with his brother. For William, the risk to his wife, his children, and the future institution he is destined to lead was simply too high to tolerate. When Princess confronted Harry with these facts, she did so with a calm, surgical precision. She explained that the rejection of the proposal was not born out of spite, malice, or a desire to punish him for past choices. Rather, it was a necessary measure of institutional self-defense. The Princess Royal made it clear that while Charles the father would always hold love in his heart for his son, Charles the king had a sacred duty to protect the integrity of the crown. By permitting Harry a hybrid, cherry-picked royal role, the monarchy would be exposing itself to perpetual vulnerability, where every private official interaction could potentially be converted into commercial material or public narrative. Harry attempted to counter her arguments, pleading that his intentions were purely driven by a desire to serve and to ensure his own children retained a tangible connection to their ancestral heritage. He argued that one mistake or misunderstanding should not wipe away a lifetime of shared history and dedication, and remained unyielding. She reminded him that trust is not a commodity that can be negotiated through contracts, conditions, or public relations compromises. Once broken, particularly in matters of high state and familial security, it leaves a scar that time alone cannot erase. As the reality of his isolation deepened, Harry realized that the very mechanisms he had used to seek independence had ultimately constructed the impenetrable wall, now keeping him out. As the final realization settled over Prince Harry, the atmosphere in the room shifted from confrontation to a solemn, heavy acceptance. Princess N, having delivered the unyielding verdict of the crown, slowly pushed the official folder to the side. The formal part of the meeting was over. The institutional boundary had been drawn in permanent ink. Yet, in that lingering silence, and looked at her nephew not as the Princess Royal addressing a banished prince, but as an aunt looking at a young man consumed by the consequences of his own rebellion. She gently reassured him that while his public role as a working royal was permanently finished, his place as a son, a brother, and a family member by blood remained untouched. However, that personal door could only remain open if it were kept completely separate from headlines, public optics, and political bargaining. She explained that King Charles, despite agreeing to the strict constitutional line demanded by Prince William and the survival of the monarchy, was still willing to maintain a quiet, personal channel of communication with him. But this gesture of paternal affection came with an absolute, non-negotiable condition. There could be no further media briefings, no subtle public campaigns, and no attempts to leverage private family encounters to force a future royal compromise. If Harry truly desired a relationship with his father and wished for his children to know their grandfather, it would have to exist in total privacy, away from the glare of cameras and the lucrative allure of public storytelling. Harry bowed his head, the anger that had fueled his initial defense melting away into a profound, quiet grief. For years, he had operated under the conviction that he could challenge the centuries-old institution from the outside, while simultaneously demanding his place within its sacred structure when it suited his needs. Facing Princess Anne's resolute stillness, he finally understood the tragic flaw in that strategy. The monarchy had survived for over a millennium not by adapting to individual desires, but by demanding total sacrifice and loyalty from those who served it, by choosing absolute personal freedom. Harry had unwittingly surrendered his standing within the royal order. When Harry finally walked out of Buckingham Palace into the crisp London air, the news of the official rejection was already beginning to reverberate across global media networks. Headlines flashed across television screens worldwide, proclaiming that the door had been permanently locked and that Prince Harry's final plea had failed. Outside the palace gates, public opinion remained fiercely divided. Some viewed the decision as a cold, heartless abandonment of a grieving son, while others saw it as a necessary, long overdue act of accountability to protect the future of the British crown. Ultimately, Princess Anne's declaration, "There is no way back," was not just a rejection of a proposal, but a definitive end of an era. It marked a moment where denial was forced to give way to reality. Blood ties would ensure that Harry remained forever linked to the royal lineage, but the institution had drawn its line in the sand. As Prince Harry prepared to board his flight back across the ocean, he was left with stark, undeniable truth. His royal past was officially behind him, and the only path left was to build a future entirely independent of the crown he had once served.